Hi and welcome, it's Gene from Avstar. Have you noticed what's going on? YouTube is throttling back the views on anyone that talks about any alternative subject in a different highlight to what the mainstream media is actually talking and putting out about. So, this is the world we live in, where clearly they are censoring the information that you receive, and that, according to the Human Rights Act, is illegal. Not supposed to be allowed to do it, even to the Constitution. And you'll find that other countries that have Freedom of Information Acts, that applies also to that country. Stifling information, ideas, and associating with people who you want is under threat right now. And this is fascist. This is straight out the Nazi handbook. We are back in the times of the 1930s. I've got some subjects I wanted to talk about. At the moment, Donald Trump is, because obviously I live in Britain, while he's on about reducing some of those tariffs on England. He said in some cases some things will go up and in some cases things will go down. And he said this not just about the UK but about other countries. He's on about putting a 54% tariff back on China, so reducing their tariff. This is market uncertainty 101. What does that mean? It means that whilst we don't know from week to week what the tariffs are, that no businessman in his right mind will place an order, because he doesn't know whether that stuff's going to arrive at the time of where he's sending it around the world, and whether it'll have tariffs on it at what level by then. Who's going to pick up the bill? Do you want, if you're a business person sending something from the UK to the United States, meanwhile, you're not sure whether that's going to hold that price of tariffs at the moment of transport until it arrives in America, and then, it could be another 50% on top. Who's going to take that risk? Are you going to take the risk of leaving your container in a dockyard in America because the person that you sold all those goods to in the container are going to refuse to pay the tariffs? And therefore the only thing you've got left to do is put that container back on the ship and bring it back, or redivert it if you're lucky. But there is the cost of the uncertainty that people are not prepared to subdue themselves to. So Donald Trump isn't this fourth-dimensional wizard at business, because if you look at all the executive orders, how many of those have matured to success? And he's written hundreds of these executive orders. I don't understand it. A lot of American people get it, and they understand what's going to happen, and they understand that the fact that a tariff is a tax that the American people pay, not the shippers. The shippers aren't going to, swallow those extra costs. And the manufacturers are not going to swallow the extra costs. They're not going to do it. It's going to be the American, people that pay that. And therefore, Donald Trump, all he's managed to achieve is mislead the American public by, using a word that is the exact same word as a tax, a tariff. And I'll tell you another word that's the same as a tax: import duty. He's not a fourth-dimensional 3D chess player, mastermind at business. This is a very stupid man, because he doesn't understand that whilst he's upping the tariffs and lowering them and upping them, he's causing market instability. And I guess that at the end of today, he will wait until the markets are closed, or just about to, because he knows there will be a reaction. That's why he said he might announce it today. It may even be Monday. But he'll do it when the market's closed, because he knows whatever's coming is going to lead to tanking the market of the S&P 500, the American top 500 companies. Let's see if I'm right. I could be wrong. The world, meanwhile, is boycotting Americans' completely. They're searching in the shops to see if it was manufactured in America, and if it's not, it's getting left on the shop shelves. People that own the shops and stores are aware of this, and they're not putting future orders in for those products because they can't sell them. And in some cases, the shop owners and store owners have removed American goods. It doesn't just stop there though. Tourism is collapsing in America. And if you are a hotelier, or you rely on tourism for your business, you will know what I'm talking about right now, that you've probably lost between 50 and 75% of your business. Canadians are refusing to travel, the majority of them, and take their vacations in America this year. And all the countries that have had tariffs slapped on them, they see it, the public see it as a direct attack on the people of that country. So why would we support anyone, American business, if we are going to be penalised for it? But the thing is, it doesn't really affect us in other countries as much as what it affects people in America. And Americans, there is a small minority of them that I would say, and some people won't like it, mainly those that supported the MAGA movement, from what I can gather, are the ones that are delusional right now. And they're saying that they are clutching at straws now. And I see this losing mentality time and time again in business, where people say, we'll give it another month. We'll give it another month. And then we'll give it another month after that. And all they're doing is dwindling whatever they could have taken out of that business, because their instinct was telling them that it was a big mistake what they've done, and it's not good for business. And it's also telling them that at some point this business is going under, and they could have, if they'd have used and relied on that instinct that they had months before, could have walked out with some money in the pockets. But I see this in business time and time again, where people will go to this level, and I'll tell you, it's like a system that gets adopted. Okay, bad news comes along and it affects your business. So you say to yourself, well, we've got to give it time for these, let's say, these tariffs to kick in properly and things to settle down. But there's no settling down since the tariffs were announced. The tariffs are going up and down, and no one's buying anything, no one's trading anything, no one's shipping anything as a result of that. You've only got to look at the American dockyards to know that 50% of that usual cargo that arrives in America is not. And it's not just being stopped from China, it's being stopped from everywhere around the world. Because we want to know, before we invest any money, whether it's going to be a sound investment or it will be directly affected. The profit margins will be directly affected by the uncertainty in the tariffs of when those things land on the shore of America. So, getting back to our analogy, that person then borrows a bit of money just to get by that extra month. And they do that by having a loan off the bank or using their credit cards. Then the next month arrives. You see, they've put themselves a little bit more in the red now. Then the next month arrives. Okay, we need to give it, we're committed now. We've already built up a bit of a debt, which we can pay off if the market stabilises. So just to get by this month now, we're going to put the house up on a mortgage. And that will keep us afloat for another month. And then another month passes by. The business still isn't doing very well. The markets are still unstable. And now you have the bank knocking on your door for some money. And this continues until, the foreclosures start to happen. You walk out of that business, not a brass coin in your pocket, and you've lost everything that you probably worked for all your life. Do you know how many times I've seen that? How many people I've seen do that exact thing, what I've just discussed with you. I see time and time again. These are people that haven't had many businesses. I've been in this situation. I've cut my losses. And rightfully so. If I'd have stuck in there, everything I'd worked for would have gone. So I sold up before it happened. I seen what was going to happen. I knew it was coming, and I thought, no way am I going to, as I have done, because you know what, I've adopted that mentality myself, and I've lost everything. And when you've had business a few times, you know when the going's good, and you also know when the going is bad. And you have to be shrewd. You have to act on what you have, you know, what your instincts are telling you, because something is trying to warn you that you've been in a situation like this and the gamble risk is high. And the best thing to do is not gamble at all. So, American businesses, as a result of this, are closing down. I've seen, you know, hundreds of people in the last couple of weeks saying we're shutting the shop. We've had enough. We can't trade. We can't replace the stocks at the prices we were paying 2 months ago. So we are going to the wall. The problem is we've got to lay off 5 people. And we've got a big problem coming because we've borrowed on the house to keep the business going. You see, that scenario that I was telling you about. People don't understand the risks involved in the gamble of hoping that things will stabilise when you've got such an unstable person in the White House right now. He hasn't just caused trouble in the United States, he's caused trouble around the world, and he has upset all the allies that was allied with America. More so, the most closest people to him on both ends of the border, Mexico and Canada. Not a very smart business move, if you ask me. Because if you want to continue, you know, being a prosperous nation, and, you know, you want to continue into the future like that, then just stay doing what you're doing. The problem is with Donald Trump is he's come in on everything. He's changed, you know, the laws with regards to drilling and fracking of gas and oil and shale oil, shale gas. You know, he's changed all the laws of that. So he's affected businesses across the range. Instead of doing one thing at a time, he has gone in and mixed the waters up of lots of rivers or lots of independent lakes, and they're not stable anymore. The water in those lakes have clouded and you can't see nothing through them. That's an analogy to look at it, you know. And every lake, you know, around you is the same. That is every business sector. That's why companies like John Deere are moving to Mexico, regardless of Donald Trump's threats of putting 200% tariffs on them. What John Deere have done is flipped the middle finger to Donald Trump and said, fuck you. You know, you are not a fucking clever businessman if you're doing things like this. Because what John Deere are doing is just the same as what every other company in America has done in the history of America. They've moved because the labour was cheaper in another country, which is really only a short-term fix, excuse me, of about 10 to 15 years, because after that, or 20 years, after you start exploiting the wages of another person in another country because they're cheaper, well, you know what, the cost of living goes up in that country because now there's more liquidity in the market and they can buy a bit more. So they actually demand a little bit more of a wage, and the cost of those labourers in the other country like China goes up. So what's China doing right now? Well, it's experiencing, you know, the exodus of its businesses to other countries. Where are the new children on the block, or the new human labourers, where the labour is cheaper? Well, it should come as no surprise. If you do a little bit of research, you'll find that these companies from China are moving out now to countries like India, Mexico, and elsewhere. But same things will happen there. You know, the cost of living will gradually rise in those countries, and what will happen is that wage prices globally, eventually, we're talking probably 30, 40 years down the road, maybe a little bit longer, but it will certainly happen, and it will increase at a rate more faster than it ever has done now because of the modern technology and the infrastructure. We can move things faster. We don't have to be on the spot. You know, that factory can be closed 1 week and opened in another country 3 weeks later. And that's exactly what was happening. China was closing up the businesses. There was a mass exodus of 500 businesses. that went to one particular country, Vietnam, set up shop there, and then Donald Trump brought the tariff prices up by around 45%, I think it was, which weren't as bad as 145% in China, but they were still nonetheless, cornered again when they arrived and set up in Vietnam. So, the strategy is business-wise viable at the moment. Always exploit the cheapest labour, because the labour costs probably the biggest chunk on your product anyhow. So by exploiting them more you can is a business move. People would say that's the same business thing. It keeps the shareholders happy. If you've floated your stocks on the market, they're happy. But inevitably, the wages around the world will come to some equilibrium and be the same. Right now, though, is what we should be thinking about. If you've got a mortgage, you should be thinking about that. If you've got loans to pay, you should be thinking about that, because the short term is not secure for you, which is not a good thing. Not secure for you, not secure for me, not secure for anyone. And as long as we have instability with regards to the tariffs, changing from one week to the next, then nothing is going to get any better. You can take that to the bank. Until there is stability in the tariffs, nothing will get better. What Donald Trump needs to say is that these are the tariffs now. They will not change. They will remain concrete. But what does he do? Oh, we have to change it accordingly, how things are. Which means that the stability is never going to be there in the American market. Does he not understand the English words that comes out of his mouth? And does he not understand how business people are going to look at him and interpret that? So what he's pretty much saying is there will never be market security. There will never be stability in the market. Well, you're better off just taking your wealth, going to another country that is, not like America, that is in the up and coming industries. And I can mention one, Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, up and coming city. Ready to do business with the world, welcoming foreigners and foreign investment. There's one country, just to mention it off the top of my head. So things are not going to get any better for the foreseeable future unless stability comes back to the market. And of course, YouTube don't like me informing you of things like this. Why is that? YouTube is an American company. It is a propaganda tool which is now being used by American lobbyists. It's quite clear and simple. And it's wrong. Because if it weren't for people like me putting videos up on YouTube, YouTube would not exist. And how cruel have YouTube been to people like me? Well, they've infringed on our freedoms to share ideas with other people. They've infringed on the freedom of speech. And if they don't like who we interview or interact with, they, penalise us for that. How have they penalised my channel? Well, they've cut the advert revenue off. We didn't earn a lot, but it helped. The advert revenue used to pay for the website bills. They cut that off. And they've refused, despite us trying to get that advert revenue back 3 times. It's not just that. YouTube have allowed us to be stalked by individuals, and despite the complaints being put forward to YouTube, they've refused, even though there are laws there to protect us on online, bullying and things like that. They have refused to investigate firstly and resolve the issues secondly, even though it is getting to the point now where we're threatening legal action over it. Because if the laws are in place and clearly they're being breached by YouTube, then there should be a remedy. If we lose revenue as a result of that, then we should be allowed to be recompensated for that. As YouTube are just vile. And I think if the bottom line is, I know some people are saying, oh, they're being throttled back, but I think what it actually is happening is the recession is catching up with a lot of these other some of them are companies on YouTube. Some of them have a lot of stores. They've noticed the level of traffic dropping. Well, let me tell you something. You should expect at least 50% reduction in your usual performance over the last 18 months. At least. But then, yes, YouTube are not helping by, throttling back the viewers. You can clearly see what's happened on my channel. The level of views have dropped dramatically. And I know this. I know that they will never admit to doing it because they're cowards. But, I've had videos that have reached 140,000 people in the past. That never happens anymore. And if you look at the views on my videos, it's by no coincidence that the algorithms are selecting a cap on the views. Because you know what? It gets to something like 871. And then a couple of videos later, guess what the cap is again? 871 views. It's like it's turned off at that point. You don't get no more views. And they don't recommend that video to anyone else. And hence, the less views, the less revenue we raise. The less people that want to donate. And that's why, we had to make a business decision to protect, what we've been doing for the last 10 years here on this channel. We had to put it onto Patreon. Because we know that the people on Patreon are there every single month for us without fail. So that's why they get, the positioning of the magnetic North Pole, and they also get the Earth Alpha at a glance. You've got to ask the question, why are YouTube going after specific channels that talk about specifics that they do? And you'll understand that when you're over the target, they react. And we have on this channel been over the target many times. We've been pointing out, the market's dipping around the world with various stocks and shares. And we've been, in some points, 72 hours ahead of the market, tanking that day we've predicted and got it right. But we used to do the same when we used to look at, if you remember, solar activity. We used to be able to predict with a level of accuracy when there would be an X-class flare off the sun. And we did it a few times. Got it absolutely right. It's just an analysis. And, I seem to be good at that. But I'm not, with regards to my business sense, I've seen what's happening on YouTube and other platforms, and I see what YouTube are doing. They are making sure you get your daily feast of recommended videos of nonsense, and have a look at how many viewers they get. They've got, first of all, say 20,000 subscribers, but the video just got 80,000 views. So YouTube are readily willing to recommend nonsense to people on a mass scale, as opposed to giving them something of more grounded, more realistic, or more of a reality than they are, opposed to giving you a load of shit that just melts your brain away, because they don't want you to be informed, and they don't want to be, they don't want the people that lobby for YouTube to, they want them to keep a grip on the markets that they've got. And another thing, what people might be noticing, the advertisement on YouTube, they don't regulate their advertisers. People that advertise with, you can sell a car that looks like a Ferrari today on YouTube, and by the time it gets to the person, it's a clapped out Volkswagen. YouTube won't do nothing about it, but they will advertise for that car company that does that. I've brought products off of YouTube's advertisement before and been caught out. By the time it arrives, it's a piece of shit. So don't buy nothing that YouTube advertises. Don't buy a single thing off any advert on YouTube, because they don't regulate first of all, the adverts, or the companies that are putting the adverts on whatsoever. And you know how many people I know that have brought, say, like there's a new one out at the moment, the laser welder. Don't buy it. It's worse than a soldering iron, and it's so cheap and flimsy, you know. Whereas, you know, a real laser welder would probably cost in the region of £40,000 to £50,000. This thing gets sold at $40. And what do you think? Do you think it's going to weld like a £50,000 one? Of course not. But people, you know, watch this and they think, really? Has the technology gone down that cheap now that we can actually own one of those? They go and purchase it. By the time they get this thing, it's absolutely useless. It can't even be used for soldering, let alone anything else. That's just a, you know, and people need to tell YouTube about it. But it seems like YouTube is a corrupt organisation. On every scale, they break the law, YouTube do. And they need to be put in their place. Because it's a filthy company with a bad reputation, and they're losing, is the big thing, they're losing their marketplace to guess where? TikTok. Have a look at how many people have a YouTube platform that discuss what goes on TikTok. So what does that tell you? What, you mean they can't find the same videos on YouTube of people discussing this? That's strange. Is it because TikTok is less controlling in the things you can talk about freely than YouTube? And of course, TikTok can earn a revenue for you. So, you know, if you're in the business of, you know, earning revenue off your, you know, your videos that you do, then you should definitely consider TikTok, because I'm considering it. I've just got a lot on my plate with other things at the moment now, because pole shift isn't the priority of where our income comes anymore. So, you know, we've still said we'll keep it on the table for those patrons. You know, it'll always be there so long as there's a bit of support for it. We'll just put our eggs in another basket now, and that's exactly what we've done. We've undergone a lot of training for the last 6 months, and as soon as that comes online, we've got a few other small ventures. Obviously, I'm talking about a couple of other people that are, you know, interested in some of the things I've got on the pipeline. They want to invest in that, and we'll get that up and running. So, you know, we've got you know, some good prospects for the future, but you have to move with the times. And I've been saying to people that have been asking me what's the best thing to do, you know, to earn a residual income. I said, well, if that's what you're after, then you've got to really exploit what you can with what you've got. You know, you've got artificial intelligence now. It can do work for you. It can create images. You could sell those images. You know, get a little eBay shop or another online store set up and sell the images. You know, or write books, e-books. You know, sell them for 50p each. You know, that's a residual income that will keep turning over month after month. You've just got to then, you know, you might only get £5 the first month, but then, you know, you double up your work. You'll get £15 or £20 the next month, and just keep doing that. Repeat the winning cycle, you know, or the proven cycle for yourself, whatever that is. And there's your residual income on top of whatever job you've got. You know, that's the way forward. You know, sitting and doing nothing, I guarantee you'll have nothing. At least if you're trying, you know, even if it's a little bit from one end, a little bit from another, you know, all these little bits come together and you've got a pie. You know, you've got a meal. You know, you might get your chips or your potatoes from one market, you know, your peas and veg from another, and your gravy from another. But bring them together, you've got a meal. You know, it helps you keep ticking over. Sitting on your arse doing nothing, well, you know, I guarantee you should expect nothing out of it. You've got to be motivated. It's like, you know, how many times have I had to re-educate myself, retrain? That's what I've done for the last 6 months. You know, revising, doing loads of, you know, coursework, things like that, getting into a completely new industry, which, you know, from my viewpoint is, you know, a solid industry in the UK at the moment. So that's what we're doing. Anyhow, guys, I'll leave it there. Obviously, I know it's a waste of time me mentioning the PayPal link, because it just, like yesterday, you know, you give out the advice, as is being proven now time and time again, it just gets ignored. People don't support anybody anymore, clearly, on YouTube. But there is the Patreon link. If you're interested in the pole shift news and the latest positioning of the magnetic North Pole, there is the Patreon link. $5 is not a lot. It's the cost of a coffee. All right. So, you know, I can't keep it any cheaper than what it is. It's actually on the bottom of the list of the amounts that you can put for becoming a patron. So, you know, I've tried to keep it as cheap as possible, as I physically can. So I can't go no cheaper than that. But if you want Earth Alpha at a glance or the latest pole position, you got to go on Patreon. I will mention the PayPal link, but I don't have any hope for it anymore. You know, it's a shame, because I've said it all along. You know, if you support, you get something out of it. Other people get something out of it that couldn't well afford it, genuinely, and we're all happy. But you know, things don't work out like that in this day and age. You know, there's a lot of going out for yourself, and it don't work eventually, because you've heard the saying, strength in numbers. You know, that didn't roll off someone's tongue for no reason. It's good philosophy. Anyway, you have a great day. Take care of your loved ones. As always, bye for now.